And welcome back to Modern Survivability. Think fast, think accurate. This is going to be Real Talk, episode 5. So, what we're talking about today, we got a couple of large things going on. First and foremost being the hurricane aftermath in the southern United States. So right now, I believe the death toll is standing at 159 across the whole area, which is obviously tragic. But the aftermath of this storm versus some of the other hurricanes we've had in the past that kind of sticks out is actually the more significant damage that's been done to some of the interior places, like in North Carolina, Tennessee, Georgia, places, South Carolina, places like that, than was done at the coast. Yeah, granted, the coast, bore the full weight of the hurricane when it made landfall as a Category 4. And did a ton of damage in Florida, obviously, but we were expecting that. What we weren't really expecting was some of the epic flooding that's happened in Tennessee, North Carolina, Georgia, South Carolina, even up into Virginia, I do believe. It's just tragic. Places like Chimney Rock, North Carolina, wiped off the map. There's a few others too. Asheville got hit really hard. Atlanta got hit really hard. And some of the devastation that we're seeing is historic. It's really, really, really bad. There's places that, because of this, the flooding and whatnot, they're having roads being washed out, no power, no water, very limited resources on anything, no cellular service in some places. I was reading reports of some of the relief coming in, bringing Starlinks and things like that, so they can restore some of the cellular service, at least for the time being, until they can get some of the utilities, some of the infrastructure kind of patched up enough that they can get communications through to these people to help out. Those places have just been absolutely devastated. It's totally tragic. And with that being said, preparing for these things, I actually did, I want to say it was last year, we did a podcast on hurricane preparedness. It was part of a severe weather series that I did. One of them was hurricanes. And one almost always associates hurricane preparedness with people to live at or near the coast. Up in the Smoky Mountains, in places, some of these places that hit, they're like a couple hundred miles from any ocean, right? So it was truly kind of I don't even have words to really describe. They've dealt with floods before, real bad floods, because of where they live in the mountainous terrains, living down in the valleys. They catch a lot of rain. They dealt with those things before, but not on this level. I believe there's one report I was reading. There's one place up there that got over 35 inches of rain. 35 inches of rain, almost 3 feet of rain. There's no ground in the world that's going to deal with 3 foot of rain. It's just not happening. Much less if you live in a valley and all that rain is coming down and, being forced down into those valleys or whatnot, to the rivers and creeks and stuff that are down there, and the lakes. There was a couple of dams that failed in the area, causing even more damage. I was looking at pictures of Lake Lure in North Carolina. I believe it's in North Carolina. Lake Lure is, and it was just devastated. It was crazy. It looked like Spirit Lake after the 1980 eruption of Mount St. Helens, as far as like all the wood and timbers and things like that were floating on the surface of the lake, what's left of it. Everything around there is just devastated. And they're having even harder times because of lack of communications, lack of roads in and out. Some of the relief efforts are having a horrible, horrible time trying to get in there and get to these people and help them out. It's a very slow and tedious process. There are tons and tons of people that are helping out, besides your obvious ones that, state and local officials, some federal officials. I haven't actually heard too much. I've kind of been looking around different news sources or whatnot, and I haven't heard a lot about the federal response to this. Not a lot of the federal response. I've seen a bunch of the things like your National Guard and things like that. But as far as like the federal response, anything from FEMA, haven't heard a whole lot out of them. I'm sure they're actively working to try to help the situation, but I haven't heard a lot from them. What I have heard a lot, and it's been spotlighted a bunch across various news agencies, is things like your Cajun Navy and some other nonprofits that are actually going in there and using their own time, their own money, their own resources, even things like their own personal aircraft, helicopters, airplanes, drones in some cases, to help deliver supplies to places that you can't get to by like a regular vehicle or whatnot. I saw videos of drones being used to deliver water and supplies to some people that they're kind of stuck out there on the other side of these washed out interstates and highways and 2-lane roads or whatnot. So it's kind of a very, very bad thing that's happened. And it's not to take anything away from the people on the coast in Florida or whatnot. They're dealing with it too. There's a bunch of total devastation down there, but it does seem like it's a little bit easier to get to some of those places in Florida to try to help out with the fixing the things than it is in some of these places that are up in the mountains that only have one or two ways in or out. There was even a part of I-40, I believe, that was washed out. So that's when we're taking out interstates and things like that. It's a pretty big deal because that kind of hampers some of the flow of supplies getting in and out. So it's something to think about. Just make sure that we're in the middle of hurricane season. There's already, I was looking at weather models, and there's already, possibility of other ones forming in the Gulf and, in the Atlantic Basin also. That's where we normally get most of them from on the East Coast, but they do form in the Gulf like this one did. So being weather aware always, no matter what, is important, especially during times of hurricane season if you live in an area that could be affected by a hurricane. And as we see here, you don't have to be on the coast. You could literally be 300 or 400 miles inland and still just get totally rocked by some of the effects of a large storm like this one. So like I said about that, like I said about that podcast that I did last year about hurricane preparedness, some of the things that, being prepared for such a large disaster. And if you live in an area that's prone to these things, you should be prepared. That should be one of the main things you prepare for. Kind of like where I'm at personally, we prepare for things like ice storms, severe weather, not normally hurricanes because I live quite a long ways from the ocean, but severe weather, severe thunderstorms that knock out power where we're at, quite often, large, hailstorms and things like that. But also on top of your regular severe weather, on the flip side of what we think about during normal storm season, tornadoes and whatnot, is your ice storms, snowstorms, blizzards, severe cold, and things like that. Taking out the electricity. The infrastructure around us is kind of shaky at best. So, with that hurricane preparedness, it goes along the same lines with the rest of the severe weather series that I did. And you can go over there and check that out on Spotify, last year's severe weather series. But, having all those preps, those things you need for a situation like this. Now, some of the people that, I'm looking at some of the pictures here, on some of the news outlets or whatnot, some things you just can't prepare for. You can be as prepared as you possibly can, and just because of where your house may be, it might literally just get washed away and you lose everything. So some of the places up there that got washed away were due to, yes, the heavy rains in general, but there were a couple of dams that failed. And that's kind of more of a severe flash flood or a flash flood emergency. It's a thing that National Weather Service uses in certain places when the flash flood is imminent to life. So, it's kind of something to think about when you're doing these preps, when we're talking about weather in general, right? So, like with your hurricane preparedness, if you're obviously in a spot that's not in a flood zone or things like that, but you're going to lose power for a couple of weeks. You got to have the food, the water, the medical, A way to conduct personal hygiene. Something to do with your, like the human waste. Where are you going to the bathroom at? Should that system fail? Now, if you live way out in the country and you already have a system in place, I got that. But people that are on city utilities, that's something to really think about. Like, one of the biggest things that happens after large natural disasters that makes a lot of people sick is the sanitary conditions. Look back at the earthquake in Haiti they had. Let's see, it's been about, I want to say almost 15 years ago now. Had a huge earthquake down there, and one of the worst things after the fact was the sanitary conditions people were living in. And it made a lot of people sick. And throughout history, we look back at large disasters and just hygiene in general. And most of that stemming, when we look back at major things, we're talking about like wars and some of those kind of things, right? And hygiene is one of the things that there's sickness from, either bad personal hygiene or just being sick because of other people's bad personal hygiene, has killed scores of people. So in a situation like this, that's, one of the main things you got to look at. Where are you going to go to the bathroom at? Because you might not have utilities for a week or two. Some of these harder hit areas, they might not have them back for a month or so. It's some of the visuals that are coming out of these areas are just, there's absolutely, tragic to say the least. Some places are going to get fixed quicker than others, but still, you got to look at some of these places that are more out of the way. And if you can't get vehicles in there, because the roads are out, it's going to be harder to get the electricity back, the sewer back, all these things in. You can only airlift so much. You can airlift your pertinent supplies by helicopter, your food, water, medical, things like that. You can airlift people out, you can evacuate them that way. But on the flip side of that, you're not lifting in the power company to fix a bunch of these things. A bunch of that stuff requires equipment on the ground, trucks, heavy equipment or whatnot to fix some of these things. So when you're looking at your preps, make sure, that you have, obviously, like I said before, your food, water, medical, have all those bases covered. Make sure you have them in a way that you can access them quickly. Make sure they're protected from the elements, if possible. I mean, you got to protect it, right? Make sure that you have enough supplies that you can go mobile if you have to, like your bug out bags and things like that. Maybe already have because hurricanes, unlike tornadoes and some of these other like earthquakes and things like that, the hurricane's coming. If you live in an area obviously closer to the water, to the beach or whatnot, where you're going to get affected by said hurricane, you should already have these things in place and have that evacuation plan already thought out and already ready ahead of time before there's even a storm even thought about. These are things that we prepare for if you live in an area like that. So having these things ready to go at a moment's notice is great. So let's say you live at the beach or whatnot and doing your hurricane preparedness, you have a couple of totes, like big plastic totes, Rubbermaid totes or whatever, that already have all your supplies for you and your family for, let's say, a week's worth of supplies that you can throw in the back of the vehicle. And whenever it gets close to time for that thing to make landfall and it's been decided it's actually going to hit where you're at, then you can bounce. You can get in your vehicle and get out. Don't wait for the mandatory evacuation orders and things like that, because if you do, you're going to get stuck in traffic, 30 miles long, and you may or may not make it out in time. So when you got, especially from a super populated area, and you got, we'll say, 1 million people trying to get out, a couple 100,000 people, whatever the case may be, it's going to be bumper to bumper for miles and miles and miles and miles. That increases the chances of accidents. That increases the chances of emergency first responders not being able to get to you. Because think about it like this. We'll say 2 days before, a day before the hurricane hits, and they have that mandatory evacuation, and you got 250,000 people on a 20-mile stretch of interstate trying to get out of a area. It's bumper to bumper, standstill traffic, and somebody halfway up through that column of cars, has a heart attack and they need an ambulance. How's an ambulance going to get there? Now first responders had to fight their way up there to get to that. And you got to also think about first responders also have families too. And some storms have been predicted to be so bad that they've actually evacuated their first responders. They were the last ones out. To the point where if you would have called during an event like that, if the phones were still working, and you called 911, you basically got an answering machine. We can go back in the last 10 to 15 years and look at situations like that with various hurricanes. Just all depending on where you were at and the level of infrastructure they were able to bring to bear for, when I say infrastructure, I'm talking about emergency response to places like that when these things happen. So, I've said a lot about this whole hurricane incident that we just had because it's kind of a big deal. And when it comes to survival and things like that, there's so much we can learn from the things. There's, some things that went well, and there are some things that can definitely be improved upon. Because one thing's for sure, there are going to be more hurricanes. It's just going to happen. We know this. We're not talking about global warming or none of that other stuff. We've been having hurricanes. There's been hurricanes ever since there's been a place for hurricanes to hit. I mean, they've always been there. Same way with tornadoes, ice storms, floods, you name it, it's always happened. And if you live in a place where water is going to get funneled down into, you're more likely to get injured or be left without a home in an incident like this. It's not their fault, but excuse me. On the same token, we have to look at ways to maybe, get your elected officials to get the right people in the right places to change some of the infrastructure around so we can maybe channel the water a little bit different, or, so on and so forth. The infrastructure can be built because there's places in the world that have landslides and floods all the time. And they have found ways to mitigate some of the risk to make it a more livable area. And if they can do it there, we can do it here. I wouldn't say it doesn't take a rocket scientist, but these engineers can get in there and figure it out. If they can figure out all the problems after Katrina with the levees and the pumps and all that with the Army Corps engineers, they can fix some of these problems. So, it's something to think about when it comes to the survival aspect and hurricane preparedness. All right, so the next thing we're going to talk about is going to be what happened today in the Middle East. So the Middle East it's been at a boiling point for the past 2,000 years. I mean, it really has, off and on. It's obviously been getting worse with Israel and Hamas and Hezbollah and all these other entities over there going at it with each other. So a couple of days ago, Israel killed the leader of Hezbollah. And obviously, they killed him in an airstrike. Obviously, that's going to have repercussions in that part of the world. So we knew it was coming. With that being said, since Hezbollah is a proxy of Iran, Iran's told Israel, you're going to pay for this, basically, in no uncertain terms. And you can go look at any of the news articles from all the different sources. It doesn't matter which side it leans, left or right. And you can find stories about this, right? Well, today, Iran launched, it was almost 200 ballistic missiles at Israel. It was earlier today. And some of them hit the ground. That most of them, according to all the reports I read, like I said, across the spectrum, because I go to all different media, left and right. I don't just go to Fox. I don't just go to CNN. I try to get the actual facts. And sometimes you have to do a little bit of research to find out, because most news sites are slanted a certain way, depending on their thoughts, right? Most news sites don't just report news anymore. They had to put their slant on it and make it whatever. Anyway, so with that being said, some of them hit the ground. And from what I'm reading, there were no casualties on the Israeli side. There were no injuries on the Israeli side from the actual strike itself. They said most of the ballistic missiles that were shot by Iran were intercepted by Israel's air defense systems. And we, as in the United States, helped out with some of that and intercepted some also. I don't know to what extent, because they haven't really publicized a whole lot about it. I do know that what I was reading on here a few minutes ago. Israeli Prime Minister is obviously vowing revenge and said, there's going to be serious consequences for what just happened. I believe it was our Secretary of State I just listened to a while ago, echoed that sentiment that there were going to be grave consequences for what Iran just did. All right, you can't just go lobbing ballistic missiles from one sovereign country to another one without some kind of response. Now, one could argue that, well, you killed this guy, so on and so forth. Hey, if you're listening to this channel and you're pro-Palestine, let me rephrase that. If you're watching this channel and you're pro-Hamas or Hezbollah, you're probably in the wrong place. You just are. Because they're terrorists. Period, point blank, end of discussion on that one. And with that being said, their guy got taken out. So with that, it's just gonna go back and forth. It always is. So, but you don't up the ante by lobbing ballistic missiles at a sovereign country from another sovereign country because of one terrorist leader gets killed. Obviously, that's what they did. All right, because they back them up. They supply them with weapons and money and all these other great things for them to attack Israel. All right. So, and also at the same time that I was reading this part of the article, they're talking about the limited incursion into Lebanon by Israel, Israeli ground forces. So we're going to see what happens with that. Hezbollah has a lot of armaments, a lot of weapons that have been stored up for a long time, and they've been getting them from places, obviously, like Iran and some other places that they really don't talk about a whole lot. So when we talk about these things, it has the possibility of spilling over. It's a powder keg over there, it really is. And when you got a lot of different superpowers eyeing for a piece of the pie, be it the U.S., Russia, China, all these people are involved in what's going on there. People forget about Russia being in Syria and all these other things, helping out a bunch of these guys. They're kind of like the elephant in the room when it comes to the Middle East, and nobody really wants to talk, much less talk about China. We're not going to go down that rabbit hole this time. But with that being said, it's a powder keg. It always has been. And that affects everybody in the world. You might think, well, it's 8,000 miles away. It doesn't really affect us here in the United States, but it does. And we're not talking about possible terrorist threats, because you got Hezbollah and Hamas and 47 other factions of, how they splinter groups that come off of these guys, people in the United States that are maybe from there to get radicalized, that, want to turn it a lone wolf, what they quote unquote lone wolf terrorists, which are really not, but whatever. And they go shoot up a Walmart or something, or a conference in San Bernardino years ago, whatever the case may be, right? Terrorism in the United States. When we're talking about the survival aspect, we're not really talking about against terrorists, because chances are, if you're out and about, you can have the best situational awareness. Catchphrase again, right? We talk about it all the time on this channel. You can have the best situational awareness in the world. A terrorist attack is a terrorist attack. You're walking down the street and a truck or something blows up beside you. You're probably not going to see it coming. It is what it is. There's not a lot you can do about those kind of things. But as far as the survival relation between this story that I'm telling you about and our everyday life and being prepared, there's so many different things. From the things that are going over there as far as spilling over into our country, there are just so many different avenues. Like I said, the whole terrorist thing, you're not going to be able to really pick up on that too much. But because of that, and the government's response to, like the thing they had, I want to say it's been last week before last. It's since our last episode of Real Talk. There was a week in there, hiatus in there, where I had some other things going on and I couldn't put out an episode. But where they had the pagers and the walkie-talkies over there detonating, that somebody had, given Hamas and Hezbollah and all these really outstanding members of society some electronics that just happened to have a way for them to detonate, and so on and so forth. And it killed quite a few of them. Unfortunately, there were some civilian, injuries and casualties, because terrorists being terrorists, giving stuff out to people, whatever the case may be. However it happened, right? So because of that, I'm sure there are restrictions to be coming, to the point where, who knows, in another year or so, you might not be able to have a cell phone on an airplane. You might not be able to have any kind of electronic devices on an airplane because of the fear that, that the whole terrorism thing. It's always that boogeyman out there in the ether. They use it to strip your liberties away, pretty much. My personal thoughts, if we would just take our nose out of other people's business, and it's like I said, my personal thoughts, in the Middle East, we wouldn't have a lot to worry about going down that road. You're still going to have your occasional nutcase that's going to go shoot up a place or something like that. But TSA, they wouldn't be having to do the whole, pat down thing on you the whole time. And the craziness that TSA does now. You wouldn't be doing that because they wouldn't be worried about a whole bunch of this stuff. But who knows, in another year, we might not be able to have cell phones or electronic devices on airplanes because of that whole deal with the pagers and the radios that detonated. So something to think about on that. And with that, more regulations in the United States stemming from things that are happening in the Middle East and other places abroad, right? Because of them squabbling back and forth and trading rounds all the time, and all these people, getting killed, to include innocent civilians on both sides, right? Let's not forget that. Is the more regulation, the more security, the more rights they're trying to strip away from your average American. And people out there that listen to this, you might say, oh, they're not taking away. Everybody just wants to be safe. How much safety are you willing to trade for your freedoms? Do you want to be in a socialist country or something like that? Because, we're kind of headed down a slippery slope as it is already, and that's just with stuff happening in the United States. Not to mention, tagging on to something that's happening in the Middle East and using that as a catalyst to strip away more rights over here to make people feel safe. Bad things are going to happen. They are. You can be vigilant. You can be prepared for things. And that's the goal of, modern survivability, is to be prepared, because you are the last line of defense. I say it all the time, right? Keeping your head on a swivel, picking up on things around you. If something's not right, you generally can tell most of the time. Like I said, with that whole terrorist bombing and things like that, sometimes it could happen, right? We don't necessarily have to worry about airstrikes in our country at the moment, because we're kind of isolated from the rest of the world geographically anyway. But who knows? It may happen one day. You never know. You never know what might happen. People in the Middle East, they have to worry about airstrikes and things like that all the time on both sides. Artillery coming in, ballistic missiles coming in, a rogue airplane slipping over, drones, people in parasails. Who knows, right? We've seen it all happen in the last year. Or year and almost. It's been a while, right? I want to say in another week, almost another week, it's been a year since that part started, right? October 7th. So many more regulations are coming. I just feel it. I know it. Every time something like this happens, they never let something bad go to waste, right? And that's both sides of the aisle. So just keep your head on a swivel. Be aware of what's going on. Now, you don't have to, have this super heightened anxiety level. That's not good for anybody. But do be aware of what's going on, right? At least look at the news a few minutes a day and get the major headlines of what's going on in the world, because it could affect you eventually. Because you can have all the great gear, you can be the best bushcrafter, have all these great skills when it comes to survivability, but if I don't know what's going on around me, how do I know what to prepare for? Generally, we prepare for general things, like, what we have living in whatever area we're in, be it the hurricanes, the tornadoes, the ice storms, the forest fires, the, floods, whatever the case may be. And if we lived in the Middle East, you'd be preparing for, armed invaders too, some of the terrorist attacks. With that rocket attack, missile attack, they said that no one was injured on the ground, no one was killed on the ground, but they did have 7 people, I believe, injured or killed, because at the same time that was going on, there was a couple of gunmen in Tel Aviv that just went up and started shooting up a place. So there were casualties in this, but from what I'm reading, none of them came from the actual airstrike itself. So keep your head on a swivel. Be aware of what's going on around you. There's so many takeaways from it, right? And those are the two major headlines I wanted to talk about today. This video is kind of going a little long as far as for two headlines, but the hurricane is a big deal, right? Because that affects people that we love and care about. Anybody listening to this, especially here in the United States, and I know there's people that listen from abroad. That's great. I'm glad you guys are watching the channel. Maybe you can take something away from it, or, leave something in the comments that maybe it's been going on the last week. That's a major news story that we can kind of hit on, or I can take a look at, or something like that. And I'm all about that too. But these are affecting our loved ones, right? So for this week, I think that's going to about cover it as far as a real talk goes. So if you like this video, actually, you know what? First, for the people all the new subscribers I got, that I put out a get home bag video on the channel a week ago, a little over a week ago. It's been doing great. Got a bunch of feedback. There was one particular thing that was in the video that if you're watching this and you commented on it, this is for you out there. And the people that didn't comment on it that still saw it. It was my first real production video of a survival related topic that I actually used really nice cameras or whatnot to do this, and had some some really good editing or whatnot going on. With that being said, some of the things got left out of the video. For instance, the first thing I want to talk about is the medical kit. I started talking about the medical kit. I was talking about some baby wipes, right? There's a place that's close to my property, and they have a large kennel with dogs, lots of dogs, and they were barking so much. You couldn't really hear it too well in there, but I was hearing it, and I thought you could hear it on the mic that I was using. So I got a little flustered, and we paused it right there. Well, I went on to do the medical kit, and talked about the medical kit that I carry in the get home bag, which is actually quite extensive for such a little bag. If you want to see the actual what's in that kit, because it didn't make it in that video, it got edited out during the final cut. For whatever reason, it got edited out. It's not really a problem though. Video I thought still turned out nice. You can go on over and check the channel out, and I already put out a video last year of the medical kit that I keep in the get home bag. It's a video by itself. Because when you actually watch the video I put out last week, it looks like I was talking about baby wipes, and then that was the medical kit, and then I moved on to Bic lighters or something, right? Fire starters. The medical kit was there on the table. It just got edited out in the video. Second thing, I was talking about the one clean water bottle and the one dirty water bottle. And that got me a whole bunch of comments. So most people were like, well, why are you starting out with, one dirty and one clean? You could have two clean. I left out some things in the video. I was trying, like I said, it's my first real good production video when it comes to that, so I forgot some stuff to talk about. I forgot to add in a few things to talk about. Just mess up on my part, right? I normally do carry 2 full water bottles in there to start out with, and then one of them gets marked dirty, and then the other one stays clean, right? And I do that because the particular water filter I use, a Sawyer Mini, right, fits on a smart water bottle better than it does anything else. You might carry something different. Hey, that's good for you, all right? But because I said, I'm going to start out with 1 empty water bottle and 1 full water bottle, people were like, oh my God, you're not carrying enough water, and so on and so forth. And I understand the sentiment. However, it's because I not necessarily misspoke, but like I said, it's the first video. I was trying to get it right. I was trying to remember everything I was going to say, because I really wanted it to be informative. And some things didn't come out the way I wanted them to. It happens, right? Hopefully my videos are going to get better from here. Maybe I'll do different editing or something like that. Maybe write some note cards. I don't know, because sometimes I forget. Everybody's human. Everybody makes mistakes. I was just trying to get some information out there. So I do have plenty of water to carry. The area that I'm in, another comment I got because the person was from Oklahoma. The name eludes me, right, because I didn't write it down, but I did read the comment. I responded. I try to respond back to everybody. Was talking about there not being a whole lot of natural springs or whatnot in Oklahoma, which is true depending on where you're at in Oklahoma. My part of Oklahoma, in the area that I travel, that I would need to use a get home bag, I have access to water year round. Even during this time of drought that we're in right now, where we spent a couple of months over 100 degrees or whatever it was, I always have access to water. Be it rivers, lakes, creeks, and stuff like that. There's always water. So necessarily with the way I was looking at it and when I was trying to explain it to video, and it just didn't really come out right, was I was more focused on the filtering part of the water than starting out with a certain amount of water, which I got it. Because I had to filter all my water. Everything here has to be filtered. I can't drink really anything right off the creek. I mean, you could if you absolutely had to, but I know how far my trip is. I know what resources I have, and I know what resources are going to be there. Now, if I know I'm going to be traveling to a different area, because I know those things ahead of time, then my plans change a little bit, and so does my loadout. My vehicle has quite a few other things that, in the event that I do have to leave my vehicle, like I did in the beginning of that video, as an example, there's a couple things that I grab extra and put them in the top of that bag, and I roll out. So I do have water and whatever. There was another gentleman on there that introduced me to a new MSR filter, a little small teeny one. I forgot the name of it right off the top of my head, but I'll go and look at it. But it's cool. I'm definitely going to check that out. If you're out there listening, thanks. I'm definitely going to check out one of those filters. It might lighten up my load a little bit. Yeah, so I was just trying to clarify a few things with that video while I was doing this one. I will be doing continuing to do videos. Granted, this one right here is done in my office. That's where I do all podcasting and everything like that. So if you like this video, make sure you like and subscribe to the channel. Shoot me a couple of comments if you got some constructive criticism or whatever to say. I'm good with that too. Head on over to Spotify and check out Modern Survivability. We're in our second season right now. I'm going to be putting out an episode probably at the end of this week on suburban survival. It's a topic that got brought up to me, so I'm going to be doing a podcast on it. It'll probably just be an audio podcast, but it might be on YouTube also. Head on over to Instagram at Modern Survivability 3. Check out the content over there. Obviously here on YouTube at Modern Survivability, Facebook at Modern Survivability. Check it out. Stop by, say hello, see what's up. Check out some of the content. So thanks for listening. Make sure that you are preparing. Make sure you are getting your stuff ready. Make sure you're always checking your stuff. All right, always checking your stuff. With that being said, remember that speed is fast, but accuracy, it's final. Stay safe, and remember, you are the last line of defense.